You black African cow, who let you in here? Heritage National Bank. Trent held the cashier's check up to the fluorescent light and squinted at it like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill. 22 clients watched from the marble benches. Marcus set his ID on the counter and did not speak. Trent turned to the room grinning and wiped the bottom corner of the check slowly across the leather of his shoe. Back and forth. Twice. The check was for $40 million. Trent did not look at the number. Marcus just watched him and then reached into his briefcase and...
Unbelievable. He just publicly humiliated the very man who secretly owns the building. Keep watching.
Marcus walked through the revolving glass doors of Sterling Heritage Bank at exactly 9 in the morning. He wore his faded green landscaping hoodie, the one with the small tear near the left cuff. His steel toe boots left faint, muddy impressions on the polished marble floor. He carried a weathered, scuffed leather briefcase, old and battered but held firmly under one arm. He moved deliberately, unhurried, calm. He took everything in. The soaring ceilings, the cold white light, the sharp smell of money and manufactured air. The lobby hummed with the quiet, efficient noise of wealth. Tellers smiled at suited clients. Advisors nodded at familiar faces. No one smiled at Marcus. He crossed to the reception desk. He set his briefcase down steady and precise. "Good morning," he said. "I have an appointment with a loan officer." The receptionist glanced up. Her eyes dropped to his hoodie, to his boots, to the dried earth near his heel. She looked back at her screen. "Take a seat," she said. "Someone will be with you." Marcus sat. He folded his hands. He waited. The lobby was cold. Not cool cold. The kind of cold that exists only in buildings designed to make certain people feel unwelcome. Marcus felt the air press against the thin fabric of his hoodie, steady and biting. He noticed the other clients seated nearby. 2 men in dark wool suits, a woman in a structured blazer, a young couple in pressed linen. They glanced at him once, then looked away. He was used to that. He did not shift in his seat. He did not pull out his phone. He simply sat still, quiet and watching. His briefcase rested at his feet. Inside it were financial ledgers, precise, thorough, and complex, the kind that took years and real expertise to build. Nobody in this lobby would have guessed that. He knew that too. That was the point. An hour passed, then another. The receptionist called 3 names that were not his. A junior advisor walked 2 suited men through a side corridor. A manager personally greeted an elderly woman with a warm handshake and an offer of coffee. Marcus was offered nothing. He checked his watch once. He noted the time. He noted the pattern. He was not surprised, but he let himself feel the weight of it anyway. The deliberate invisibility, the careful, practiced dismissal. He had grown up knowing this particular silence well. It had a texture familiar, heavy, and cold, like wet concrete setting slowly around your ankles. Then he saw the tablet on Officer Hayes' security desk near the east wall. Hayes was a broad-shouldered man, mid-50s, with a steady, watchful face and a uniform that fit him with quiet dignity. He was scrolling through a duty log. Marcus stood across the lobby and stopped at the desk. "Excuse me," he said. "Could I borrow that for 1 moment? I need to check a quick email before my appointment." Hayes looked at him, not with suspicion, not with dismissal, but with the flat, careful assessment of someone who had learned to read a room honestly. He handed the tablet over. "Sure," he said. "Make it quick." Marcus nodded. He typed quickly, efficiently, and without hesitation. His fingers moved with the confident, practiced precision of someone who had spent years inside complex systems. He was not checking email. He was doing something far more deliberate. In under 40 seconds, he returned the tablet. "Thank you," he said. Hayes gave a short nod. Marcus walked back to his seat. He sat down again. He folded his hands. He waited again. At 11:30, a loan officer appeared. Not Trent, a junior officer, young and uncomfortable in his jacket. He led Marcus to a small, glass-walled side office, offered no coffee, no water, no greeting, and immediately began asking questions in a tone designed to discourage. Marcus answered each one directly, clearly, and without emotion. He opened his briefcase. He placed his documents on the table, one by one, organized, clean, and meticulous. A full financial summary. 3 years of detailed income records, a flawless credit report showing a score of exactly 800, a project outline for the community center, complete with impact projections, construction estimates, and neighborhood demographic data. The junior officer stared at the stack. He had not expected this. He cleared his throat. He said he would need to pass the file to a senior officer. He gathered the documents awkwardly. He left the room. Marcus sat alone in the glass office. Through the wall, he watched the lobby continue its careful choreography of preference. He noticed who was seen. He noticed who was not. He pressed one finger lightly against the side of his briefcase and felt the quiet, certain weight of what he already knew. Why was a landscaper carrying financial ledgers? This sophisticated nobody in the building had thought to ask that yet. That was, Marcus noted silently, exactly the problem. Trent arrived at the glass-walled office 12 minutes later. He did not hurry. He walked the way men walk when they believe every room belongs to them, slow, deliberate, and faintly bored. His custom Italian suit was a deep charcoal gray fitted without a single loose thread. His platinum watch caught the cold light as he turned the door handle. He carried Marcus's file loosely in one hand, the way someone carries a takeout menu they have already decided to throw away. He sat down across from Marcus without a greeting. He opened the file. He looked at it for exactly 4 seconds. He closed it. He looked at Marcus instead, at the hoodie, at the boots, at the hands resting on the worn leather briefcase. He let the silence sit. Then he smiled, thin and deliberate, the smile of a man who has already made his decision and is enjoying the small theater of pretending otherwise. "So," Trent said. He leaned back in his chair. "You're here about a loan." It was not a question. It was a tone flat, faintly amused, and edged with something sharper underneath. Marcus held his gaze. "That's correct," he said. "A community center development loan. The documentation is complete, current, and fully compliant." Trent tapped the closed file once with one manicured finger. "I can see that," he said. He did not reopen it. He tilted his head slightly, studying Marcus, the way a man studies something mildly out of place, a scuff on a new floor, a weed in a trimmed garden. "Tell me something," he said. "Who put you up to this?" Marcus did not blink. "No one," he said. "I identified a property, assessed its development potential, secured preliminary financing commitments, and prepared a full application. The credit score is 800. The income documentation covers 36 months. The project plan includes construction phasing, community impact data, and zoning compliance. Everything you need is in that file." Trent smiled again, wider this time. He picked up his polished platinum pen and tapped it once, twice, 3 times against the edge of Marcus's briefcase with slow, deliberate rhythm. The tapping sound was small, but pointed a little performance of condescension. 800, Trent repeated. He said it the way someone repeats a word in a foreign language they find funny. "That's a very impressive number, for someone in your, let's say, situation." The word situation landed exactly as it was intended to. Marcus felt it in his chest, not as pain, but as data. He noted it. He filed it. He kept his face still calm and unreadable. "My financial situation is documented in full," he said. "The application meets every stated requirement." Trent set the pen down. He leaned forward now, both forearms on the desk, his expression shifting into something that wore the costume of reason. "Look," he said, quiet and almost gentle. "I'm going to be straight with you because I think that's the respectful thing to do here." He paused. He let the pause breathe. "People like you don't build things like this, not because of capability necessarily, but because of, let's call it, fit. This kind of development, the neighborhood, the property, the profile of our lending portfolio, it requires a certain kind of established presence. You understand." He did not wait for Marcus to confirm that he understood. He reached into the file. He pulled out the loan application, the full document, the one Marcus had spent 11 weeks preparing. It was printed on heavy parchment paper, dense with careful, precise language, structured with the kind of professional rigor that reflected years of real knowledge. Trent held it up for a moment. He looked at Marcus over the top of it. Then, without ceremony, without hesitation, and with a faint, satisfied exhale, he tore it in half. The sound was sharp, aggressive, and clean. It cut through the quiet office like something breaking that was not meant to break. The thick parchment resisted for exactly 1 instant, then split completely, a precise and violent sound that hit Marcus in the sternum and radiated outward. He felt his jaw tighten. He felt the heat rise in his throat, controlled, contained, and burning. He did not move. He did not speak. He sat completely still while Trent placed both halves on the desk between them with the calm finality of a man closing a chapter he authored. "That property," Trent said, his voice now smooth and almost bored again, "is going to someone who fits the profile of what this bank builds relationships with. I'm sure you can appreciate that." He stood. He straightened his jacket. He picked up his platinum pen and slid it into his breast pocket. I was already moving toward the door when Marcus spoke, quiet, even, and unhurried. "Federal auditors," Marcus said, "look very closely at backdoor property discounts, especially when the deviation from market rate exceeds 15%, especially when the beneficiary has a documented personal relationship with the approving officer." Trent stopped. He turned. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, his expression cycling through surprise, irritation, and then amusement, settling finally on amusement because amusement was safer and more comfortable than the alternative. He laughed once, a short, dismissive sound. "A paranoid dirt digger," he said. "Right." He shook his head. He opened the door. "Have a good day." Marcus stood slowly. He reached down and picked up his briefcase. He looked at the two torn halves of his application on the desk. He did not touch them. He did not need to. He turned and walked out. Trent thought he had closed the door on a nobody. He did not know he had just handed the key to his own destruction. And somewhere in the bank's local server, quiet and invisible, a small piece of code was already watching, waiting, and recording every single thing Trent was about to do next. Trent did not wait long. The door to his office clicked shut behind Marcus, and he was already reaching for his phone. He moved with the loose, confident energy of a man who has just handled something unpleasant and is rewarding himself for it. He loosened his collar by one button. He crossed to the small credenza against the wall, the one with the crystal decanter and the row of heavy-bottomed glasses. He poured. The scotch was aged amber and expensive, a bottle that cost more than most people Marcus knew spent on groceries in a month. The ice followed. 2 cubes dropped with a self-satisfied carelessness that sent a sharp, ringing clink echoing against the crystal. Trent lifted the glass. He did not toast anyone in particular. He simply drank slow and deliberate, the way men drink when they believe the world is correctly arranged around them. He pulled up a contact on his phone. The name was saved simply as RC. No last name, no title, no trace of formality. He pressed call. It rang twice. A voice answered, warm, familiar, and instantly conspiratorial. "Trent," the voice said, "tell me something good." Trent smiled. He turned toward the window, away from the glass wall facing the lobby. "That property on Caldwell Street," he said. "The community parcel. It just became available again." A pause on the line. Then with quiet, greedy interest, "How available?" Trent swirled his glass. "Very," he said. "We're talking 30, maybe 35% below assessed market. Clean transfer, no competitive process, no public listing. I handle the internal paperwork, you handle the usual arrangement on your end, and we close inside 10 days. Another pause, shorter this time. "The usual arrangement," the voice repeated slowly, savoring the phrase. "Yes," Trent said. "The usual arrangement." Outside the glass wall in the lobby, Officer Hayes stood at his post near the east wall. He was not looking at his duty log. He was looking at Trent. Through the glass, the scene was visible. Trent turned toward the window phone, pressed to his ear, shoulders relaxed, gesturing once with his scotch glass in a way that telegraphed celebration. Hayes had worked this lobby for 19 years. He had developed a precise, reliable instinct for the difference between a business call and a dirty one. The body language was different. The timing was different. A senior loan officer pouring aged scotch before noon, making a private call within minutes of rejecting an applicant, was a pattern Hayes recognized. His eyes narrowed. He did not look away. Back in his office, Trent set his glass down. He sat at his desk. He opened the bank's internal property management system, moving through the screens with practiced ease, the ease of someone who had done this before more than once and had never once been caught. He pulled up the deed file for the Caldwell Street parcel. He adjusted the internal valuation figure, quiet and methodical. He rerouted the transaction pathway, bypassing the standard dual approval requirement with a code override he had obtained 14 months earlier under the pretense of an IT access audit. He created a notation in the file that read, prior relationship expedited review officer discretion applied. It was the kind of language that sounded official, procedural, and completely legitimate to anyone who did not know what they were looking at. He saved the file. He leaned back. He picked up his glass again. The scotch was warm now, slightly diluted by the melting ice. He drank it anyway, slow and satisfied. He thought about the commission structure on the side arrangement. He thought about the country club membership renewal coming up in 6 weeks. He thought about the new car he had been considering a matter of personal taste and appropriate status, nothing more. He did not think about Marcus. He did not think about the community center. He did not think about the family that had been trying to secure that parcel for 3 years, the after-school programs, the youth mentorship space, the small, stubborn dream of a neighborhood trying to build something permanent and decent for its children. Those things did not exist inside the frame Trent had built around himself. Inside that frame there was only the transaction, the arrangement, the glass, and the quiet, greedy clink of ice against crystal as comfort settled over him like something earned. What Trent did not think about, could not think about because he did not know it existed, was the tracer. It had been sitting inside the bank's local server since that morning, since the moment Marcus had typed those quiet, unhurried keystrokes into Officer Hayes's lobby tablet with the calm efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they were building. The tracer did not announce itself. It did not slow the system. It did not trigger a single security flag. It simply watched patient and invisible logging, every access, every override, every altered figure, every rerouted transaction pathway, every saved file and deleted notation, assembling them into a clean, time-stamped, forensically precise record that grew more complete and more damning with every move Trent made. By the time Trent finished his scotch, the file was nearly perfect. By the time he stood, straightened his jacket, and prepared to walk back into the lobby as though the afternoon were entirely ordinary, the record was complete. The wire transfer confirmation arrived in the side account at 4 minutes past 2. It was legally binding. It was fully documented. Every keystroke, every override, every figure, every timestamp locked and recorded and waiting. Outside on the rain-slicked street, Marcus sat on a cold bench with a cheap plastic bottle of lukewarm water. He did not know yet what the tracer had captured. But above him in that warm golden corner office, Trent raised what remained of a $500 glass of scotch and toasted a theft he believed was invisible. He thought his digital tracks were covered in the dark. The man he had kicked out was already holding the flashlight. He just had not turned it on yet.
Wait, absolutely not. He just stole land meant for kids so he could pocket a dirty kickback with his country club buddy. If that were me, I would have dragged that computer right off his desk. Imagine watching someone steal your community's future while sipping expensive scotch. The audacity is real.
Marcus returned the following morning. He came through the revolving doors at 8:53, 7 minutes before the lobby reached full capacity. He wore the same hoodie, the same boots, the same weathered briefcase under his arm. He carried a cashier's check official certified and drawn against a private account most people in this building would not have recognized the name of. He crossed to the reception desk. He set the check flat on the counter. He asked calmly and without preamble to speak with the senior loan officer regarding the Caldwell Street property. The receptionist looked at the check. She looked at Marcus. She picked up her phone. She dialed an internal extension. She spoke quietly. She set the phone down. "Someone will be right with you," she said. Her voice had a different texture this morning, careful, uncertain, slightly off balance. Marcus stepped back from the desk. He stood in the center of the lobby. He waited. Trent appeared in under 2 minutes. That itself was notable. Yesterday, Marcus had waited 2.5 hours. This morning, Trent moved fast, but not because he was accommodating. He moved fast the way a man moves when something has appeared in his territory that he needs to remove quickly and cleanly before it becomes a problem. He came through the side corridor with his jacket buttoned and his expression already set hard, dismissive, and faintly theatrical. He stopped several feet short of Marcus in the open center of the lobby where 30 clients and a full complement of staff could see and hear everything clearly. That positioning was not accidental. Trent understood lobby acoustics. He understood the power of an audience. He had used both before. "I thought I made myself clear yesterday," Trent said. His voice was not quiet. It carried deliberately shape to reach the ears of every suited client near the teller windows, every advisor at the side desks, every person in the room who represented the kind of relationship this bank valued. This application was denied. That property is no longer available through this office. And frankly, he paused, letting the pause do its work. I'm not sure what you thought you were going to accomplish by coming back here. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not step backward. I have a certified cashier's check, he said, level and precise, for the full assessed value of the Caldwell Street parcel. I am requesting a formal review of the denial under the bank's stated appeals procedure. He reached into his briefcase. He placed the check on the marble counter beside him, visible, official, and impossible to casually dismiss. Trent looked at the check. Something moved behind his eyes fast and controlled a flash of something that might have been unease if he had allowed it to develop. He did not allow it to develop. He looked back at Marcus instead, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped into something quieter and more dangerous. You want to talk about procedures, he said. He took one step closer, closing the distance in a way that was deliberate and physical, a performance of dominance dressed as conversation. Let me tell you about procedure. Procedure says that a man who was asked to leave this premises yesterday, who was told in clear terms that his application did not meet our lending criteria, does not get to walk back in here the next morning and make demands. That's not a procedure, that's a problem. He turned. He did not look at Hayes directly. He did not need to. Officer Hayes, he said loud and clear and carrying across the full width of the lobby, please escort this gentleman out. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. 30 people turned. 30 pairs of eyes settled on Marcus, on his hoodie, on his boots, on his briefcase, on the cashier's check sitting on the marble counter that no one moved to pick up. The judgment in that silence was dense, immediate, and burning. It pressed against Marcus's skin like hot iron, the specific searing weight of being made into a spectacle in a room full of people who had already decided what kind of person he was before he opened his mouth. He felt it in his jaw, in the set of his shoulders, in the slow, controlled breath he drew through his nose. He did not flinch. He did not look away from Trent. He stood completely still and let the moment exist around him without surrendering a single inch of himself to it. Hayes crossed the lobby. His footsteps were measured, unhurried, and heavy with something that was not enthusiasm. He reached Marcus. He did not grab him roughly. He did not perform aggression. He placed one large hand, careful and almost apologetic, on Marcus's arm near the damp fabric of his hoodie, the same faded green hoodie, slightly darker now from the morning rain. The heavy steel handcuffs on Hayes's belt caught the light as he moved, cold and present, a reminder of what this moment could become if anyone decided to escalate it further. Hayes did not escalate, but the handcuffs were there. The client saw them. That was enough. Marcus allowed himself to be guided toward the doors. He did not resist. He did not argue. He moved with a quiet, deliberate composure that was somehow more unsettling than any protest would have been. As Hayes walked him through the lobby, past the teller windows, past the suited clients with their careful, averted expressions, Marcus turned his head slightly. He looked at Hayes directly. His voice was low, meant only for the guard beside him, private and precise. Keep your eyes, he said quietly, on the boardroom screen at 3 p.m. Hayes said nothing. His grip did not tighten. His expression did not change. But something shifted behind his eyes, small, careful, and attentive, the look of a man who has just been handed a piece of information he intends to think about seriously. The revolving door turned. The cold, wet air of the street hit Marcus across the face, sharp and immediate. Behind him, the lobby resumed its choreography, smooth, ordered, and satisfied. Trent stood near the reception desk, straightening his jacket, nodding once to a nearby client with a smile that said everything had been handled appropriately. The cashier's check still sat on the marble counter. No one touched it. No one picked it up. It simply remained there, official and certified, and completely ignored the way certain truths are ignored when the room has already decided on a more comfortable version of events. Marcus stepped off the curb into the rain. He did not look back at the building. He did not need to. He was dragged out like a criminal, and Trent stood inside his pristine lobby, comfortable, untouchable, and completely certain of his victory. I was not thinking about 3 p.m. He had no reason to. The man he had just removed from the premises was barefoot in the rain as far as Trent was concerned, finished, dismissed, and irrelevant. He could not have known that the most dangerous thing about Marcus was not what he carried in his briefcase. It was what he had already quietly set in motion inside the walls of this building, patient and invisible, counting down toward an hour, Trent had not yet begun to dread. The bench was cold, not the managed artificial cold of the bank lobby, but the real kind. The kind that comes from wet iron and open sky and a wind that does not care what it touches. Marcus sat with his forearms on his knees and his briefcase between his boots on the rain-slicked pavement. The hoodie was soaked through now, the thin cotton offering nothing against the weather clinging to his shoulders in a way that made the cold feel personal. Above him, 4 floors up, the warm golden light of Trent's corner office glowed against the gray sky, steady and indifferent, the way privilege glows when it does not know it is being watched. Marcus looked at it once. He looked away. The rain came in slow, uneven waves. It was the kind of rain that does not commit to being a storm, just persists, thin and biting and relentless. The kind that soaks you completely while somehow never feeling dramatic enough to justify the damage it does. Marcus's fingers were cold. He pressed them together, felt the stiffness in his knuckles, and held the sensation without moving. He had learned a long time ago how to sit inside discomfort without letting it become panic. That was a skill hard-earned and specific, the kind that comes not from discipline alone, but from years of having no other option. He watched the street. A cab moved past, throwing a thin sheet of water against the curb. 2 office workers hurried by under a shared umbrella, their shoulders pressed together, their conversation inaudible. A delivery driver locked his bike to the rack across the street, moving with the practiced, unbothered efficiency of someone who had stopped negotiating with the weather entirely. The city continued at its ordinary pace, indifferent to the man on the bench and to everything he was carrying, visible and invisible inside that battered briefcase and behind those steady, unreadable eyes. Then the bank doors opened. Marcus looked up. A family came through the revolving glass, a man, a woman, and 2 small children, a boy and a girl, the girl holding the hem of her mother's coat with both hands. They were dressed carefully, cleanly, the kind of careful that takes effort and intention and communicates quietly that this visit mattered, that they had prepared for it, that they had believed it was worth preparing for. The man had a folder tucked under his arm. His jaw was tight. The woman was not crying yet, but her face held the specific, fragile stillness of someone using everything they have to hold the tears back until they reach somewhere private. They did not reach somewhere private. The girl looked up at her mother. The mother's face broke quiet and sudden, the way faces break when they have been held too long. She turned away from the street. The man put his arm around her. The boy stared at the pavement. They stood there for a moment, the 4 of them in the rain outside the building that had just told them no, and then they began to walk slow and close together down the wet sidewalk and away. Marcus watched them go. He did not look away until they turned the corner. Then he faced forward again and felt the full weight of what he had just seen settle into his chest, heavy, dense, and devastating. He had come here to test a system. He had dressed deliberately, moved carefully, documented everything, planted the tracer, built the case with patience and precision. He had told himself it was a controlled exercise, a principled strategy, a necessary exposure of something that needed to be exposed. He had believed that. He still believed it. But the woman's face on those steps was not an abstraction. The boy staring at the pavement was not a data point. The cold, wet grief of that family walking away from a closed door was not a variable in anyone's strategy. It was just a family in the rain, carrying the specific weight of a world that had looked at them and decided they did not qualify. The self-doubt arrived the way it always does, not loudly, not all at once, but as a quiet, persistent pressure behind the ribs. Had he waited too long? He had the tracer data from day one. He had recognized Trent's pattern inside the first hour. He had known with the calm certainty of someone who understood these systems from the inside exactly what was happening and exactly what it would lead to. He had chosen to let it run. He had chosen to let the fraud complete itself, to let the wire transfer confirm, to let the evidence become legally airtight before he moved. That was the strategic decision. That was the correct decision. It would hold in court, in a board review, in a federal audit. He had been right to wait, but the girl had held her mother's coat with both hands. And Marcus had been sitting on this bench in the rain while Trent approved the theft of her community's future over a glass of aged scotch. He pressed his jaw shut. He felt the cold deep in his knuckles. He felt the weight of the briefcase against his shin, solid and real. He sat inside, The doubt did not fight it, did not argue with it, let it move through him the way cold moves through wet fabric, completely and without permission. I was not certain he had done the right thing by waiting. He was not certain he had not. What he was certain of, with a clarity that sat beneath the doubt and was not touched by it, was that the door was not closed. Not yet. Not for the family that had just walked away. Not for the community center. Not for the kids who would have used it. The wire transfer was complete. The record was locked. The trap was set and sealed and waiting. It was 2:41 in the afternoon. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A notification from the Tracer application, clean and precise, a single line of text confirming that the fraudulent wire transfer had been logged, time-stamped, and packaged into a complete forensic file. Every override, every altered figure, every rerouted pathway, every keystroke, every second of it documented and legally binding. The trap was not just set, it was perfect. Marcus looked up at the bank building. He looked at the revolving doors, the marble lobby visible through the glass, warm and ordered and certain of itself. He looked at the rain. He looked at his hands, cold, stiff, and steady. He thought about the boardroom. He thought about 3 p.m. He thought about Mr. Sterling, the retiring bank president, who was scheduled to be in that boardroom at 3 p.m. to finalize the very transaction Trent had constructed around him without his knowledge. He thought about Officer Hayes and the look in Hayes's eyes on the way out through the lobby. Small, careful, and attentive. The look of a man who had been handed a piece of information and intended to think about it seriously. Marcus stood. He picked up his briefcase. He rolled his shoulders once against the cold. The rain was still falling thin and relentless, and he was soaked through, and none of that mattered at all anymore. He thought the rain had washed away his chances. It had not. The master of this particular storm had simply been waiting for the right moment to move. That moment was 17 minutes away. He began to walk. The boardroom was on the 4th floor, glass-walled on 2 sides with a long mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, and a projection screen that covered the full width of the north wall. It was the kind of room designed to communicate permanence authority and the quiet, unquestioned assumption that the people inside it belonged there and everyone outside it did not. At 2:58, Trent sat at the near end of the table across from Mr. Sterling, the bank's retiring president, a man in his late 60s with white hair, careful eyes, and the measured, deliberate manner of someone who had spent 4 decades learning how to read a room accurately. Between them on the table sat a property transfer document, 2 copies clean and official, waiting for signatures. Trent had his platinum pen uncapped and ready. I was 3 minutes from completing the cleanest theft of his career, and he looked exactly like a man who knew it and was enjoying the sensation. Mr. Sterling had not signed yet. He was reading. He read the way careful men read documents that will carry their name slowly, thoroughly, and without apology for the time it took. Trent watched him read and kept his expression patient and collegial, the expression of a man with nothing to hide and no particular reason to hurry. His knee moved once under the table, a small, involuntary motion, the only visible evidence of anything operating beneath the surface. He stilled it. He recapped and uncapped his pen. He looked at the projection screen, blank and waiting at the far end of the room. He looked at the door. He looked at his watch. 2:59. Downstairs, Marcus came through the revolving doors at exactly 2:59. He was still wet. The hoodie clung to his shoulders. The boots left damp prints on the marble, and the weathered briefcase was dark with rain. He crossed the lobby without slowing. The receptionist looked up. She reached for her phone. She did not reach it in time. Marcus was already past the desk, moving toward the corridor that led to the executive elevator. Steady and unhurried, the specific calm of a man who is exactly where he is supposed to be and has simply been waiting for the right moment to confirm it publicly. Officer Hayes was at his post near the east wall. He saw Marcus the moment the revolving door turned. He watched him cross the lobby, watched the receptionist reach for her phone, watched the whole familiar choreography begin to assemble itself into another removal. Hayes stood still for 3 full seconds. I thought about the morning, about the cashier's check on the marble counter, about the family on the steps in the rain, about the private, precise words Marcus had spoken on the way out through the lobby, low and certain and meant only for him. Keep your eyes on the boardroom screen at 3 p.m. Hayes had thought about those words for 6 hours. He had turned them over carefully, the way a man turns over something that does not quite fit the frame he has been given and is deciding whether the frame is wrong. He moved, not toward Marcus to intercept him, away from his post toward the executive corridor, and he moved with the quiet, deliberate purpose of a man who has made a decision and is finished deliberating. He reached the corridor door before Marcus did. He held it open. He looked at Marcus directly, not with apology, not with performance, but with the flat, honest acknowledgement of someone choosing clearly and finally which side of a thing they are on. Marcus met his eyes. He nodded once. He walked through. The executive elevator opened on the 4th floor at 3 p.m. exactly. Marcus stepped out into the carpeted hallway. He walked to the boardroom door. Through the glass wall, he could see the table, the documents, Mr. Sterling still reading Trent with his uncapped pen, the blank projection screen at the far end. He could see the moment before everything changed, contained and unsuspecting, like a room that does not yet know it is on fire. He opened the door. He walked in. Trent looked up. The expression on his face moved through 3 distinct stages in under 2 seconds: confusion, irritation, and then something that was not quite either of those things, a flash of cold recognition that came and went so fast it might have been invisible to anyone not watching for it. How was watching for it? "This is a private executive meeting," Trent said. His voice was controlled, authoritative, and slightly too loud for the size of the room. "You need to leave immediately." He looked toward the door, expecting Hayes, expecting the familiar machinery of removal to engage itself automatically. The door stayed open. Hayes stood in the frame. He did not move to intercept anyone. He simply stood there, arms at his sides, watching. Mr. Sterling looked up from the document. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Trent. He set the document down flat and deliberate and folded his hands on the table. He did not speak. He waited with the patient, attentive composure of a man who has learned that the most important information in a room often arrives unannounced and without an agenda item. Marcus set his briefcase on the mahogany table. He opened it. He removed his phone, connected it to the boardroom's wireless display input with 2 quiet keystrokes, and looked up at the projection screen. The screen came to life. What appeared on it was not a presentation. It was a record, clean, chronological, and forensically precise. The Caldwell Street deed file with its altered valuation figure, highlighted in clear contrast to the original assessed value. The internal override code time-stamped and attributed. The rerouted transaction pathway annotated with the specific dual approval requirement it had been designed to circumvent. The wire transfer confirmation complete with the receiving account details and the timestamp of 4 minutes past 2 the previous afternoon. The full conversation log from the bank's internal system, every keystroke, every saved file, every deleted notation, every step of a fraud that had been assembled with careful, practiced confidence by a man who had believed completely and without doubt that no one was watching. Trent's face went pale, not gradually. All at once, the color leaving his skin the way light leaves a room when the power cuts sudden and total. His breath caught. The room felt smaller. The air pressure seemed to drop, a suffocating physical change that everyone in the room registered in their own body without being able to name it. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His platinum pen was still in his hand. He was not aware of it. "My name," Marcus said, his voice level, unhurried and completely without theater, "is Marcus Aldridge. I am the majority shareholder of the Sterling Heritage Group, the parent company of this bank. I have held that position for 14 months. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. What is displayed on that screen is a complete forensic record of wire fraud, internal document falsification, and the deliberate circumvention of dual approval compliance requirements, all conducted by a senior officer of this institution over a period of approximately 22 hours. He looked at Trent directly. Every figure, every timestamp, every override is documented, legally binding, and has already been transmitted to the relevant federal oversight authority. Mr. Sterling had not moved. I was looking at the screen. He was reading it the way he read documents, slowly, thoroughly, and without apology for the time it took. His face was calm, but his eyes were working, moving across every line with the focused attention of a man assembling a picture he did not previously have and finding that it explains a great deal. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the muddy boot prints on the $50,000 boardroom carpet, two clear impressions in the deep piled damp and unhurried and completely unashamed of what they were. He looked at Trent. Trent had found his voice. "This is," he started. He stopped. He tried again. There was a system issue, a processing error. The figures on that screen are the result of an internal audit anomaly that I flagged myself and was in the process of correcting through the correct channel, which is what this meeting was actually about, and if you will just... He stopped again. The sentence had no ending that was going to help him. He knew it. The room knew it. The screen behind Marcus continued to display everything quietly and without comment, the way evidence displays itself when it is complete and has nothing left to prove. Marcus looked at him for a long moment, calm, steady, and entirely without cruelty. He did not need cruelty. He had the record. "Mr. Sterling," he said, turning to the older man, "I apologize for the manner of this interruption. I would have preferred a different approach." He paused. "I did attempt the standard one yesterday." Mr. Sterling looked at Marcus. Something moved in his careful eyes, recognition, and beneath it something that carried the specific weight of a man, understanding fully and without comfortable evasion what had been done inside his institution and in whose name. He uncapped his own pen. He turned the property transfer document over face down in a single decisive motion. He looked at Trent. Behind Trent, through the glass wall of the boardroom, the lobby was visible 4 floors below, small and ordered and continuing its careful choreography of preference. And at the boardroom door, Officer Hayes stood in the frame, arms at his sides, his expression quiet and resolved, holding the door open for no one in particular and for everyone who needed it. The same guard who had been forced to escort a man out into the rain that morning, now watching the same man stand at the head of a boardroom table in muddy work boots and holding his post with the steady, honest dignity of someone who had chosen correctly and knew it. Trent's smug smile was gone. In its place was something rawer, smaller, and entirely without the costume of authority it had worn for so long. The man he had thrown in the trash was the one who owned the building. That fact was now on a screen in a boardroom in front of a witness with a federal record already filed. There was nowhere left to go with it. There was no version of the next few minutes that ended well for Trent. There was only what came next. And what came next had already been decided, not in this room, but on a wet bench in the rain by a man in a faded hoodie whose fingers were cold and whose resolve was not. Mr. Sterling stood. He did not do it quickly or dramatically. He rose with the measured, deliberate movement of a man who has spent 4 decades earning the authority his posture carries, and when he was fully upright, he turned to face Marcus completely. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Marcus, at the muddy boots, at the damp hoodie, at the weathered briefcase open on his mahogany table, and then he did something that silenced the room more completely than anything that had been said in it. He inclined his head. A slow, small, deliberate bow, the kind that carries more weight than a handshake, more meaning than a title, the kind that says without performance or ambiguity that the man across from me has earned my full and unqualified respect. "Mr. Aldridge," he said. His voice was steady and clear. "I believe this institution has a great deal to answer for, and I believe you are precisely the right person to receive that accounting." Trent made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a man makes when the architecture of his certainty collapses all at once, a sharp, involuntary intake of breath that he could not control and could not disguise. He was sweating. Not the faint, polite perspiration of a warm room, but the specific, visible, soaking sweat of a body in genuine panic, dark at his collar, bright on his forehead, his $500 shirt earning none of the composure it had been purchased to project. His platinum pen was still in his hand. He was gripping it now tight and purposeless, the way a man holds something familiar when everything familiar is dissolving around him. "There's an explanation," he said. His voice had lost its shape. "The authority, the deliberate carry, the practiced ease, all of it was gone, replaced by something thin and effortful that convinced no one, least of all himself. The system there was a processing anomaly. I have the documentation. I can show you the audit trail that proves this was a correction that I initiated, that I personally flagged for review." He was looking at Mr. Sterling. He was not looking at Marcus. Looking at Marcus had become something he could not do. "If you'll just give me 20 minutes with the internal system, I can demonstrate exactly how this." He stopped. Mr. Sterling had not moved. He had not spoken. He was simply looking at Trent with the patient, undeflectable attention of a man who has heard a great many explanations in 4 decades and knows immediately which ones are real. That attention was more devastating than any argument. Trent felt it land on him like weight. He stopped talking. Marcus opened his briefcase. He removed a single folder clean and organized and placed it on the table beside his phone. He opened it. He began to speak. Not loudly, not with theatrical satisfaction, but with the quiet, precise authority of a forensic accountant who has spent his career learning how to take a complex financial crime apart at every seam and lay each piece on a table in the exact order it needs to be seen. He walked Trent through it from the beginning. The first access of the Caldwell Street deed file time-stamped at 11:47 the previous morning, 4 minutes after Marcus had left his office. The valuation adjustment, the specific figure, the original assessed value, the altered figure, the percentage deviation, 33.4% below market, the threshold for federal scrutiny clearly and deliberately crossed. The override code, its origin, its procurement 14 months earlier, the pattern of its use across 3 previous transactions that had not yet been reviewed but would be, the rerouted approval pathway. The internal notation, prior relationship, expedited review, officer discretion applied, its language, its function, its use as cover, the wire transfer, the receiving account, its registered holder, its documented relationship to the officer who had initiated the transfer. Every piece placed in sequence, each one locking the next in place with the clean interlocking precision of a case that had been built not in anger but in patient, meticulous, deliberate craft. Trent's face moved through the full accounting in silence. The color had not returned. His jaw was set, then loose, then set again, the muscles working without producing anything useful. His eyes followed Marcus's hands as each document was placed on the table, the way a man watches a door being closed on a room he cannot get back into. By the time Marcus reached the wire transfer confirmation, Trent had stopped trying to find an interruption. There was no interruption available. The record was complete, sequential, legally airtight, and already filed. Every argument he might have assembled had been anticipated, documented, and closed before he arrived at this table. The police arrived at 3:21. 2 officers in uniform, accompanied by a federal investigator in a dark jacket who carried a slim briefcase and moved with the particular, unhurried efficiency of someone who had already reviewed the transmitted record and was here to complete a process rather than begin one. They came through the boardroom door, they crossed the carpet, they stopped beside Trent's chair. The federal investigator spoke first, brief and formal, identifying himself, citing the relevant statute, confirming the charges. Trent stood. He did not stand voluntarily. He was guided upward by one officer with a hand at his elbow, and he rose with the specific, deflated compliance of a man whose body has accepted what his mind is still refusing. The handcuffs came out. Cold, heavy steel, functional and indifferent to the fabric they closed over. They snapped shut over the sleeves of Trent's ruined $3,000 custom Italian suit with a sound that was small and clean and absolute, a single precise click that rang in the silence of the boardroom the way a period rings at the end of a sentence that has been a long time coming. The click echoed. Then came the warmth. It moved through Marcus's chest, the way warmth moves when it is real and earned and has been a long time, waiting slow and full and radiating outward from somewhere deep. Not the heat of triumph, which is loud and temporary, but the quiet, profound warmth of something being made right. He watched Trent's face as the cuffs closed. Trent was not looking at anyone. I was looking at the table, at the mahogany surface and the documents and the open briefcase and the forensic record displayed quietly on the projection screen. The record that had not moved or changed or retreated from the moment Marcus had put it there, patient and complete and entirely sufficient. He was looking at everything he had built and at the precise, efficient way it had come apart. Hayes was at the door. The same door he had stood at an hour earlier to let Marcus through, the same door he had stood at that morning in the lobby to escort a man out into the rain. He held it open now as the officers guided Trent through it, and he did it with the same quiet, measured dignity with which he had held his post for 19 years. Not with satisfaction, not with theater, but with the plain, steady bearing of a man who had chosen correctly when it mattered, and was simply seeing it through to the end. As Trent passed him, Hayes did not speak. He did not need to. His presence in that doorway said everything that needed saying. that the same hands that had been required to remove Marcus from this building were now holding the door as Marcus's evidence removed Trent from it, and that the difference between those two moments was the entire point. The boardroom was quiet. Mr. Sterling remained at the table. He looked at Marcus. "The Caldwell Street property," he said. "I assume you have a preferred resolution." Marcus reached into his briefcase. He removed the community center deed already drafted, complete and waiting. He placed it on the table. He uncapped a pen. He signed it. The warmth in his chest deepened as the ink moved across the paper, slow and deliberate and permanent, the specific radiating warmth of a signature that means something, that builds something, that returns something to people who should never have had it taken. He capped the pen. He set it down. He looked at Mr. Sterling. "The discriminatory lending criteria," he said. "All of it. Every policy, every informal practice, every unwritten standard that produces what happened to that family on those steps this morning. I want a full audit, a complete structural review, and new compliance protocols in place within 60 days. Mr. Sterling nodded, once without hesitation. 60 days, he said. "You have my word." Marcus picked up his briefcase. He closed it. He walked to the boardroom door, the same door Hayes had held open, and he paused there for a moment, looking down at the lobby 4 floors below, at the marble floor and the cold white light and the careful, ordered choreography of a world that had looked at a man in a faded hoodie and mud-caked boots and seen nothing worth seeing. He looked at the faint impressions his boots had left in the $50,000 carpet behind him, 2 clear, damp marks in the deep pile, unhurried and unashamed. He thought about Trent's face in the lobby yesterday morning, the polished platinum pen tapping against his briefcase, the mocking, deliberate rhythm of a man who believed he could measure another man's worth by the condition of his shoes. He thought about the sharp, aggressive sound of thick paper tearing. He thought about a girl holding her mother's coat with both hands in the rain. He had thought he could judge a man by the dust on his boots. He had forgotten to check who owned the dirt. Marcus walked out. The deed was signed. The fraud was federal. The community center would be built. And on the 4th floor of Sterling Heritage Bank, in a boardroom with a projection screen that still displayed every piece of a career being dismantled in perfect forensic sequence. The only sound left was the quiet, permanent hum of an institution beginning at last to reckon honestly with itself.
Y'all, my heart is still pounding from that explosive, righteous karma. If you were in Marcus's shoes, watching the arrogant man who profiled and humiliated you get dragged out of the lobby in handcuffs, would you have let him apologize, or did he get exactly what he deserved for stealing from the community? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if you live for stories where arrogant bullies get humbled by hidden power, make sure you join our family for the next one.